the contrast between the Beaverbrook legacy of corruption and lying and shoring up Boris Johnson with the basic evidence, which is that a lot of people have offered to feed the kids during the October school half term. That 322 Conservative members of parliament voted against. So the gullibles, not all of them are gullibles, or at least the gullibles have been kind of swayed to make a stand about hunger and poverty that the Conservatives are denying. And the Boris graph has got no mention on the front page of this Saturday, 24th of October. Saturday, the 24th of October, the Boris graph has no mention of this, which is the Daily Mirror is running on the Conservatives, Boris Johnson being exposed as unfit. If ordinary people have to take steps to feed the children who are left to suffer hunger, while the government pays billions to the crooks and big business, then the Conservatives are unfit. And the Boris graph is proving that it is with the unfit Conservatives. There is nothing on the Boris graph that even remotely refers to the crisis. Instead, they're talking about sex in the lockdown. And that is the nearest they come. So here is a reluctant confession by the Daily Mail, which actually refers to consultants. Remember, the running theme of this world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street has contained and does contain evidential assertion exclusively made by us that the NHS, the principle of the NHS has been and had been kind of neglected for 70 years. And that the neglect includes the impunity and the license de facto, that is in effect, in fact, given to and allowed to consultants to fleece the main funding and the resources of the NHS. So it has been a kind of double negligence and rot. In other words, if the consultants were reined in, that is to say, if they were held to account and prevented from abusing their positions in the NHS establishments and setups and kind of hospitals, units, and operations, if the consultants were prevented from doing that, then counting backwards from the start of the NHS up to now, there would have been enough spare resources and capacities available in the NHS to meet all the, or at least meet in an optimum way, at optimum level, the majority of the needs for medical and hospital treatment and service and care at the point of need. But that has not been the case. The consultants have been given impunity. And the impunity has been given by the Labour Party as much as by the Conservatives. Consultants, by definition, are kind of anti-social and anti-societal because they're greedy and they're selfish and they're uncaring and they're corrupt. All of these are the kind of features of the makeup of what a conservative is. So the opposition to that makeup, those elements, should have been offered in practice by the Labour Party, which hasn't offered that opposition over the last 70 years. So here is a reluctant piece, therefore, in the Daily Mail, which says that consultants are being paid that much money. And while the kind of claim by the Johnson-fronted cabal is that there is not enough money. So this one is on pages 12 and 13, which says 24 million, 20 contracts to PwC, Price Waterhouse, and then 788% increase in home office spending on consultants. And 3.8 million, 16 contracts to McKinsey. These are really mainly so-called accountancy businesses. They're not accountancy at all. They are false accounting crooks and criminals. And it is a robbery on a mass scale, open robbery. And there is no squeak of de facto actual opposition from the Labour Party. Never has been. And the fact that Corbyn kind of picked up on the other people's kind of slogan, the many as opposed to the few, late in his kind of period as the so-called leader of the Labour Party, didn't mean that Corbyn was actually doing anything to create the awareness among the Labour Party supporters of the urgency of the need to hold consultants to account and prevent them from robbing the public. So this is the latest confession, but it's reluctant because they would not have done this confession to the Daily Mail had they been following Johnson's kind of unfitness, because they were among the main propagandists for the lying line that paraded Johnson as the most suitable, appropriate, and fit kind of leader of the Conservatives, by definition, the leader of the country after Theresa May. And they carried every day, daily, lies to make Boris Johnson come across as fit and competent and caring. None of this applies to Johnson on the record of his kind of career, which is selfish career. And that is why the Daily Mail is also running another piece on pages 8 and 9, which is headline proof that the UK is sick of lockdown. That is the other kind of evidence. But again, despite the fact that they are saying that this is based on evidence, and they've got also a piece about the Big Brother spying on the social distancing. So they've got 3 kind of 2-page spreads, so 6 pages of extensive so-called reporting against the various measures in place under Boris Johnson, which are all failing. Now that is only one day, and they have got only 6 pages. If they were truthful and wanted to confess and tell the readers and the public the truth about Johnson's failures, they could fill the whole paper. And the paper, including the sports pages, runs into how many pages? 128 pages of the Daily Mail today. This is 128 pages. So the first page is the one about the hysteria about these various measures. And it says, supermarkets are banning sock sales, CCTV spies on social distancing, road checks on Welsh border, teacher threatens playdate pupils with police. Now, these are all kind of going against the kind of line, the narrative that they had kind of run for years, promoting Boris Johnson, against the evidence. The evidence was, and that was long before the possibility even existed that there would be a pandemic, let alone there would be a pandemic at the time that it happened. For 30 years, starting from the kind of very early start of Boris Johnson's lying career, or career of lies and lying, the Daily Mail has supported Johnson. There was no evidence. Absolutely the opposite was the case, that every time the Daily Mail was given the evidence of Johnson's corruption and lying and incompetence and unfitness and greed and selfishness, the Daily Mail paraded him as being the opposite. And it happened for years and years and years and years. Now, this thing about hysteria, about COVID hysteria, is only tip of the iceberg, because society was not prepared because of the agenda that Boris Johnson personifies, which is recklessness and reckless disregard and negligence towards the community and towards society. Then other serious defects in society, or in the government, in the machinery, in the institutions, are going to get exposed. And there won't be any time to actually repair or mend those. Too many people will be affected adversely by the failures that are kind of mounting. This is not just a hysteria. It is actually the evidence of a fragmented or fragmentation of institutions that are supposed to have been there, secure, reliable, unbiased, and fair and competent and appropriate to help people who needed the help in health and in other respects. So the poverty, that this whole thing about the free school meals, the 322 Boris supporting conservatives, Boris following, Johnson following conservatives opposed the minor kind of motion to allow free school meals to the children. This is just a tip of the iceberg of the kind of criminality of the attitude and outlook that those who are supporting Johnson, and it is the entirety of the House of Commons, they are causing the problem and they're ignoring the problems. The reason is that they are the smallest. They represent the smaller number of people in society, or they represent the interests of the minority in society. They have done for decades. And that is something that the Labour Party has failed to point out. Now, Marcus Radford is a 22-year-old footballer. He should not be doing this. He should not be having to do this at all. Footballers don't do that. Sports people don't do that. It is the job of elected politicians to do that. And the elected politicians carrying the Labour Party banner have failed to do that. That shows that while the Conservatives destroying society, robbing society and looting society on the one hand, the Labour Party has been asleep. And the only thing that Angela Rayner, Keir Starmer's deputy, can manage to get in the news on is that she called a Tory scum. She should not have been in the news about that. She should have been in the news about details of the evidence of the corruption that the Tories are kind of committing. So the newspapers are not really investigating that, and what we are saying, newspapers in Fleet Street should have been saying, but they're not saying that. All of the kind of sympathy, if you like, that is coming for the cause that Marcus Rashford, the footballer, has initiated is coming reluctantly. And it's coming reluctantly because the evidence is so overwhelming that the Tories' opposition to the free school meals motion, which just technically had to be put on the table by a Labour Party MP or a member of Parliament. The evidence is so strong that even the Murdoch scum, and that is a scum, we call it scum and we are calling it on the evidence scum. Now, even the scum which failed to support the people of Greater Manchester and the people of Northwest and the Northeast of England is forced to acknowledge that, but acknowledging it in a kind of twisted way, typically twisted way, the Dunkirk spirit, it had to be kind of twisted into kind of reduction to the stage of just, the people who are cooking for the children, hungry children. And they are desperate, the Murdoch scum, on page 2, they're desperately looking for an excuse and a pretext to say that Boris Johnson is still a star. Look at that. That's the piece they managed to find. That's the pretext. They managed to find the pretext that he is a poppy star. And they are completely in denial about what he has done. And they are denying the facts that ordinary people are moved by the cruelty of the Conservatives into kind of offering support and food for the children. And obviously, Marcus Radford is, of course, having to tweet that this is the England he knows. This is the generosity and the kindness of spirit that he knows. But the Sun is not doing a double spread about the 322 MPs and their cruelty. Instead, they are doing a piece against Angela Rayner. Read this headline. MPs rap Labour on scum outburst. Now, rap, for those who are not familiar with the colloquial kind of English, is criticism. And the word MPs is being used to synonymously as Conservatives. What it means is that Labour Party doesn't have MPs, or Labour Party MPs don't count, including Angela Rayner. And that has been the line that I pointed out yesterday, Friday, that they have been talking about MPs opposing Marcus Rashford, not Conservatives. See the difference? They are saying MPs, meaning the MPs who are opposed to Marcus Rashford's kind of campaign to have the children given free school meals. The fact that more than 200 MPs, Labour Party MPs mainly, voted for that move is completely hidden, denied by the scum and the so-called mainstream. And so therefore they're denying that these MPs are even MPs. So that's the kind of subliminal brainwashing of the gullibles that has been going on for decades by the scum and the others in Fleet Street. And they're reluctantly forced to run an editorial supporting Marcus Radford. And they're saying in the editorial top Marcus, in the last paragraph of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 paragraph editorial, so-called, they're saying, let us just be grateful to all those businesses and communities which have stepped up, support them in turn, and marvel at this story of hope. In a dark time, can you believe this? The dirty digger, Rupert Murdoch's scum newspaper, is admitting that Boris Johnson is leading darkness or leading the country into darkness. That is the evidence. And there is no denying that they are saying that, but they are not acknowledging. They're not acknowledging the criminality, the cruelty, the selfishness, and the dishonesty of the Johnson fronted cabal and of Johnson himself. Now there is a piece completely separate from that virus thing, is a piece about an alleged pupil in a school. Where is the school? Now, this is supposed to be an asylum seeker from West Africa. And they're saying that he has got, his bald head gives him away, and he's not a 14-year-old, 15-year-old schoolboy. He's actually he looks more like aged 40. Now that's the item that they're running because parents have been concerned about him attending classes with their children, because he looks like he's more than twice the age he says he is. A new school pupil who recently moved to the UK, claiming to be 15, is going bald and looks 40, it was claimed yesterday. Now that is the line, that their line is about asylum seekers, that their asylum seekers are gross and so dishonest that they would do anything to stay here or to get the benefits of the largely kind society. The kindness that they are unable to show, the kindness that they are actually looking for in the behavior of Boris Johnson and his 322 MPs who voted against this Radford kind of motion to feed the hungry children, poor children. But that is a human kind of story, if you like. And we shall be talking about Deirdre, who is celebrating 40 years at the Sun. She's saying, I have helped millions with their problems. But I've had a few of my own: alcoholic mother, parents divorce, pregnant as a teen, and losing baby, marriage counseling. Now this is again, the kind of denial. Deirdre has been denying the truth about most of the problems she has been kind of she claims to have solved and helped people, because the main problem of poverty and deprivation and discrimination, that has been that series, that collection of problems she has been in denial of. So this scam is lying even when it is actually accurate to say that she has been advising quite a lot of people. By definition, people would have contacted her because it's a widely circulated publication, so people would have contacted her for that reason, not because of the content or the quality of her advice. And the fact that so many people have been desperate, millions of people have been desperate to seek help over 40 years, shows that the problems that society and its institutions should have addressed have not been addressed or recognized, let alone solved. And again, the role of the Labour Party in all of that has been absent. I mean, contrary to the mythology about all these leaders of the Labour Party, so-called left-wing leaders, socialist leaders, the evidence shows that there has been no socialist leader. And in the case of Corbyn, who has been kind of lauded by his bots and real humans, I mean, Corbyn has been empty. I mean, he has lacked substance. I mean, he has been as stupid, nearly as stupid as Neil Kinnock. And this is on the evidence. Kinnock was completely an idiot. And Kinnock messed up the Labour Party's prospects. And the fact that he was a windbag, whatever his background in terms of ethnicity or region, was not an accident. Because he was dishonest, Neil Kinnock, he was a windbag. He decried the criticisms, the evidence that the right-wing policies of Margaret Thatcher were hurting people, just like today's or this week's evidence shows that the Conservatives are openly denying call for helping the poorest people. That is what the Tories do. And that had been the case when Thatcher was in place where Johnson is now. And instead of correlating the poverty and the lack of justice, lack of fairness, lack of opportunities, and lack of housing, lack of employment with the policies and the agenda of the Conservatives as fronted by Margaret Thatcher, Kinnock rounded on Labour Party's own members and campaigners. And he focused on the so-called militant. The militant never posed a threat to society as compared to the Conservatives. And Kinnock failed to even acknowledge 10% of the damage to society that Thatcher was causing by attacking the mine workers. Arthur Scargill would never have been the figure that he became, figure of opposition to Margaret Thatcher on behalf of the mine workers, if the Labour Party in Parliament and the Parliamentary Labour Party as fronted by Neil Kinnock had been opposing the Conservatives. And Kinnock was given, he was kind of bequeathed this kind of post of Labour leadership by Michael Foot. That shows Michael Foot's political stupidity. Michael Foot, posing for decades as a left-winger, socialist so-called, preferred Neil Kinnock to be the leader after he left. And that is just a short list of only two of them. And I'm saying that all the Labour Party leaders, including Wilson, despite the fact that they had kind of intellectual differing kind of levels of intellectual kind of abilities, all the Labour Party leaders of the last century, the main century of the Labour Party, if you like, lacked the commitment that the party needed and the application that the party needed. And when George Lansbury was briefly leader, he failed to get across the message. He did his best, but he failed to get across the message. So what I'm saying is the Labour Party has been misled, ill-led by people. So if the leadership has been wrong, the ordinary members of parliament have been as wrong as well, collectively. Even today, the weekend after the vote against the motion to feed the hungry children, the vote by the Conservatives fronted by Johnson, there is nothing in the papers, nothing in the media. From the Labour Party, there is a significant amount from Marcus Rashford, and there's a diversion because there is nothing from the Labour Party as the political opposition in the so-called democracy, so-called Mother of Parliament, exposing the real illness and sickness of the Conservatives and the sickness of the loose-term democracy. As even Socrates knew, I mean, democracy left on its own is absolutely useless. And so therefore, democracy is subject to awareness, intelligence, and rigorous monitoring and watching, and rigorous advocacy based on the evidence. I mean, it applies from the time of Socrates when he kind of expressed pessimism and depression about democracy being the answer. And it has been going on. So whoever coined the phrase, constant vigilance is the price of liberty, whoever that is, or however many people contributed to that, has got it right. The only way democracy can function for the many, which Kinnock and Corbyn similarly failed to actually articulate and apply to the behavior of the party workers and the party at their relevant times. Constant vigilance is the price of liberty and the price of accountability and the price of a fair, democratic, answerable, transparent society. And this call is not coming from any of the Labour Party kind of post holders, front persons, back persons, nobody. They are kind of tinkering. Angela Rayner calling them scum doesn't actually explain the base, the evidence underlying their being scum and cruel. And she doesn't run a narrative. She doesn't go through the various stages, the last decades, last years, how the Conservatives are allowed to get away with this and behave in this way. The reason why the Conservatives can dare, they dare defy the overwhelming evidence of poverty. So many millions are inflicted on. Or are buried under or pushed into. That has to be quite easy by reference to the income, the jobs, the lack of accountability by the local councils. That is something, as we have been saying, that is the kind of stranglehold. The Labour Party is too compromised opportunistically, careeristically as kind of moved by the career seekers, councillors wannabes, career-seeking MPs, and the kind of any number of the selfie seekers now. In the age of the selfies, the social media accounts run by or in the name of the Labour Party kind of individuals, self-seekers, and the Labour Party branches and operations. These are embarrassingly ignorant and stupid and shamelessly empty of substance on every issue. Okay, against that background, what is the Guardian saying in favor of the council stepping in to feed children as anger grows? Now, who caused the anger? The Guardian is saying the councils are stepping in, but the councils are not taking the initiative. This is not the councils taking the initiative to feed the angry. It has to be made a significant kind of point there. Councils are not taking the initiative. They are not taking the initiative to end poverty and destitution and homelessness in their kind of boroughs. They are not. Let that sink in, because what they're doing, I mean, this is a topic. This is a topic about feeding the hungry children that has been created directly as a result of the initiative by this particular footballer. It is not, so far as is known, the work of the Labour Party or work of any council or any councillors, let alone any of the mayors, including Andy Barnum, who is the Labour Party mayor at the expense of Greater Manchester. I say expense of because I cover the periods before the kind of virus and the periods that Barnum spent both as a member of the cabinet of the last Labour government and also as an opportunist, self-seeking careerist, even before he joined the cabinet and as a member, and before the election, before his election as an MP. So there is no, I mean, Barnum jumped on the bandwagon of the Hillsborough kind of massacre, campaigners for justice, for the victims of the massacre of the Hillsborough kind of massacre, yes? He did that. And he articulated a lot of the genuine concerns when he spoke about that while he was still an MP and spoke as an MP. And he has been given credit for that. And he has actually, in terms of propaganda, name recognition, and electoral kind of plausibility, he has benefited without any doubt in his bid to become the candidate for the Labour Party as the mayor of Greater Manchester and also get elected. All of that is acceptable, but not enough. What he has not spoken about is not about the kind of COVID-19 or the virus, but he has been silent about all the councils, the 10 councils that make up the Greater Manchester area. Their culture of kind of lack of accountability, their disconnection with the legacy of the Peterloo campaigners 200 years ago. I mean, you have to go that far to find anything in Manchester that resembles genuine, real political action and campaign, the Manchester area, that is. So what we have to look at is who is actually covering this truth, not the Guardian. Despite the fact that the Guardian is talking about councils in a way that the Guardian alone can actually be relied on to say. The Guardian has a particular corrupt kind of connection with the idea of local councils, because many of the councils place advertisements in the Guardian, and many of the kind of Guardian quote readers and patrons and business subsidizers or beckers include many counselors. But the counselors are not doing the normal council jobs on all the other aspects of the council's duties. There is no rigor. There is no rigorous kind of analysis in the Guardian ever about council's failures. So this is a headline that is like the Daily Mirror and even the Sun. The Sun is reluctantly kind of promoting this campaign of this footballer. So the Guardian is actually giving another aspect of that campaign. But the Guardian is silent on the destitution, deprivation, denials caused to millions by councils across the country. These same councils. And that has to be exposed, and we are exposing that. So Marcus Radford is pictured in the Guardian on page 5 with his mum. And they've got a very good kind of line about him, including praise for him by his school, the school he attended. And the Guardian has got little pieces about various aspects of the virus. But it is not. And they're speculating on whether Andy Barnum is ready to lead the Labour Party now. And so that is the kind of angle that they're running, but that is wrong, because that may be the case. He may end up being the leader of the Labour Party, but that should not be mistaken for leading against the Conservative agenda. That's the thing. Whether he has kind of had enough experience and become ready to be accepted as leader of the Labour Party doesn't make the difference. The difference is if he will oppose the Conservative agenda, the Conservative Party. As I have explained, will he be different from Kinnock? Will he be different from Foote? Will he be different from Callaghan? Will he be different from Wilson? Will he be different from Blair and Brown in opposing, effectively opposing the Conservatives? And the Conservatives have not been opposed, not for 100 years or 120 years, whatever the length of the time since the Labour Party was launched. And there is no narrative coming from the media, most certainly not from the Guardian. And if there is nothing from the Guardian, then there is nothing from the so-called left against the Conservatives. And what is missing in the Guardian, from the Guardian today? That today, the United Nations marks the 75th year, according to the publicity coming out of the United Nations. There is nothing in the Guardian about the United Nations. and the cruelty of the conservatives and the lack of care by the conservative MPs and the lack of real contrition by the Murdoch scum and the Beaverbrook Daily Express is proof that despite the fact that the United Nations has been there for 75 years and the fact that the UK's political kind of crew at the time openly contributed to the founding of the United Nations, the United Nations membership has not been kind of recognized by any party in power or a party in opposition. And Keir Starmer is himself silent as far as we can see. And so is The Guardian. And most certainly, the rest of Fleet Street is, of course, silent. Is the Financial Times any different? The Financial Times has got the lead pages or the lead pieces featured on the front page, trailer on the front page, include the piece about Putin on the piano and the great retirement rethink. And there is a piece about the cities without tourists. And the piece, of course, the main piece is about the banks acting to stifle home loan boom. And the second main piece is UK in danger of worst deal on financial services than the EU gave to Japan. The City of London, that is the business part of the operation, warns the Conservatives. And then there is a piece about COVID curves putting brakes on the recovery of the economy. And there are lazy pieces about the activities of the rich. Except this piece, which should have been on the front page, actually. It says, pandemic makes world's billionaires even richer, which is exactly what is going on in Britain, not just some faraway place. And they've got a picture of Jeff Bezos and his girlfriend, Lauren Sanchez. And they're saying, in a piece from Zurich and London, enlarged fortunes of super wealthy expose widening inequalities under coronavirus. Now that is only half of the story. The truth of the story is that the institutions that are supposed to be holding these criminals to account are complete jokes. All the institutions, all the regulators, so-called, are completely tools being exploited to further enrich the already super rich robbers and criminals and gangs and gangsters. So the Financial Times is not really telling the truth about the finance and the financial corruption and criminality in the period of the virus. And what the Daily Mirror, the Guardian, and the scum have done is being repeated and copied by the Star, Daily Star. And what is the thought for the day? The thought for the day was, or is, it was an open goal and the clowns missed it. Now that is the joke paper. And it says the United, the British people flock to help rush kids. And your Daily Star coughs up £2,000. Can you imagine? Only £2,000. That is stupidity. And it has got another misleading piece about the legal aid scam. The 3 thugs were given legal aid. Now, that is never the case. Legal aid is a misleading term because it is never paid to the person in whose name legal aid is applied for and delivered. It is to the licensed law traders. It's limited to the licensed law trader. No litigant in person is allowed any legal aid. So the papers are lying about legal aid today as they've been lying before. And the corrupt BBC new far-right kind of director general is given a completely untruthful plug about diversity display. It is saying that the new director general wants the BBC guests to mirror society. What they mean is that there should be more stooges, Uncle Toms, Nephew Toms, Niece Thomases, or whatever, and there should not be any scrutiny. That's the difference. Scrutiny of the racist and corrupt BBC. Corrupt and racist and abusing the license fee payers and their money. And so therefore they're doing the thing about the kind of support to the cause. But the scam, the Star, just like the scam, Murdoch scam, and even the Daily Mirror, they're not talking about the underlying overwhelming poverty and the overwhelming causes of poverty and the role played by the silent opposition in parliament for decades, and the role played by the actively corrupt local councils, a large number of which are controlled by the Labour Party members. And they are not held to account for their corruption and their criminal behavior. And the same thing is happening here on the I newspaper, which is running the same kind of similar headline, kindness of strangers. These are not strangers, these are people in society, the same society. These are neighbors in the same society. So it's not strangers. And there is a very appropriate cartoon, surprisingly, that says it all in there. There is a child with an empty plate facing Johnson. Johnson is refusing to engage with the facts and the evidence, saying that he has got too many things on his plate. And this child is holding up an empty plate saying that, but I have nothing on mine either. So that is a summary of the actual equation or lack of equality in this society fronted by Boris Johnson and his cabal. And they're saying that the public has stepped in to stop children going hungry. The children won't go kind of hungry just for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever the length of the time covered by the motion for free school meals. Essential fact is, why should children go hungry at any time at all in this country? Especially when this country is controlled by decision makers who give 12 billion pounds to a complete kind of open scam under the cover of coronavirus. I mean, 12 billion pounds is too much. I mean, the children won't need 12 billion pounds to get fed properly. Why is the Labour Party leading as the party to end poverty and injustice in this country, covering all aspects and all levels? That is the question. And that is not the question that is covered in this paper. And there is nothing in the I newspaper either about the United Nations being 75 years today. Is there anything in the Times, Murdoch Times? No. They're talking about something that has neither the end nor neither the beginning nor the end, because talking about Vladimir Putin in that way doesn't take the reader far into the facts or the evidence. And this is a completely diversionary excuse by the Times to avoid having to acknowledge and truthfully report on the failures and the cruelty of the conservatives, and especially the 322 conservatives who voted against making it possible for children to have free school meals. So the Times is completely lying there. It's a diversion. Putin is not ever examined by any newspaper, including the Times. It's a completely a kind of smokescreen kind of name, Putin. If they gave evidence as to how many people were linked with Putin or his kind of agents in this country, that would be a different thing. But that's not what they're doing. They're not giving any evidence. They're not connecting the role of the businesses, British big businesses, and with Putin or with China. But they keep running. It's like a decoy headlines in order to deceive the readers into thinking that that is the important news item. This is not. It would be if they had the substance, the connections, the naming, the linkage. No Russian so-called billionaire in this country has ever been actually identified with evidence. It's all kind of smear and insinuation. They may be guilty of all kinds of things, but the newspapers are not publishing the facts. That is the point I'm making. And this is a typical example. The whole page, front page, is given to that. And denial of the cruelty of Boris Johnson and his cabal. That is the Times. So what is the Boris graph doing? It is saying, the very Boris graph of Saturday is saying, what is it saying? It is saying that the National Trust facing inquiry into its purpose. I mean, National Trust facing inquiry into its purpose, but the Conservatives are not facing inquiry into their purpose or their agenda. And Boris Johnson is not facing calls to resign on the ground that he is cruel. We shall be continuing in the next edition.